Good morning, this is Robert Radford with 50 Years of Chess. I've got another game for you, and it's another game with Richard Allen, my old friend from Down End Chess Club, who I believe before me was with another club when we played this game. It's quite an old game, this one. It's from 1994. Richard's grade suggests that it was around then, because I haven't got the actual date. But looking at his rating, he was at rating around about 1994. So Richard, in ELO terms, would have been about 1184, and I was about 1745. So Richard was white, and this is the way the game went. He played e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. So I'm not playing Mr. Sicilian like I usually do, because this is a long time ago, and I don't think I was playing it much back then. I was playing the standard e4, e5 stuff. So he played d4, which is Scotch gambit, which I accepted, and he didn't take the pawn. He played bishop c4, which is well known. It's sort of like a Goring gambit type thing he's playing here. So I played bishop e7, a Hungarian defence, which stops the knight from going to e5 to attack the pawn on it, f7. So now he's playing the Goring gambit with c3. I played d6. He took the pawn. I didn't want to take this pawn because it just develops another piece on c3, so I played d6. Knight c3, castle, bishop g4, pinning the knight to the queen. He drops the bishop back to defend that knight. Already he's getting in a bit of a problem because he's developed it, the bishop c4, all the way back to e2, and so he's lost tempo there. d5, ed, knight takes d5. And now he's throwing a spanner in the works with knight e5. I could play knight takes knight, but I quite like bishop takes bishop here. It's good to get his white squared bishop off the board, then my h7 pawn is a little bit healthier. Knight takes on e2, bishop d6, and he played knight takes knight, pawn takes knight. I really don't mind this. It's okay as far as I'm concerned. The pawn's weak, but it's also supporting my knight on d5 at this time, and it opens up the b file for me to attack down. So he's gone knight c3, rook b8, a3, and then rook e8. So in just a couple of moves, I've got both my rooks on good files. One's open and one's half open file, and I think I'm doing okay here at the moment. Now this is a bit strange. Richard took the knight, and I was able to undouble my pawn, so I'm very pleased with that. b4. Now queen h4. I'm not messing around now. I'm coming in to try and attack his king. So he's played g3, which was natural and sensible, and I played queen back to f6. He's played f4. This is very committal, Richard, doing this, because he's opened up his king side. Very weak all around his king. Lots of holes, and he hasn't got control of the e-file either. So I brought my rook down to e4 so I could double my rooks, and he played rook e1 to stop it from having two rooks on that file. So he got rid of one, but I've got a double attack on his d-pawn now, so he's had to defend that with bishop to b2. It's king side. Now, if he were to take that pawn, I could play rook takes pawn on d4, and if he then retook the bishop, I can play queen takes pawn on d4, and I pick up the rook on a1. So it's not a good idea to do that. So he played queen f1, got his queen closer to his king to protect it. Now I'm really ramping it up with getting some power on that e1, e8 file. So he's played bishop to c3 to try and compensate and stop me from coming down to e1, and also that he can play his rook across next move. So I played rook e2. I'm really penetrating into his defence now. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of open squares around his king. It really wasn't a wise thing to do what he did, but he's playing the way he thinks is best. So he's brought his rook across. He's hoping that we can get the rooks and queens off, and then it would be perhaps a drawn game. So I played queen e3 check, king h1, queen check, king g1. Now I'm doing this at the time, I remember, because I need to get some moves on, because we're a bit behind on time, and when you can repeat moves, sometimes it helps get a few more moves on the board before you make your mind up what you're going to do. So I did it once more. Obviously, if I check him again and then he goes back, that's the draw. So I wasn't going to give him the draw. I played rook takes, rook, queen takes rook, and then I played queen d3. It took me a little while to work this out, but I thought, well, I can do this, because if he checks me on e8, then it's good, because I can just go king h7, and he can't take the pawn on f7, he'll lose the bishop, or, better still, I've got queen f1 mate. So this is why I did this, and it keeps him in a bind, as I'll show you in a moment, on what my plan is. So Richard actually did check me, and I went to king to h7, then he went back again, and then I went bishop e7, because he can't take it. He'll be mated on f1 if he does that. So I was able to get my bishop now into a much better square. So what he did was brought his king up. So now I have got to move the bishop. So I played it to f6, and I'm hitting the d pawn twice. So Richard plays queen to d2. I don't know what else I could do, really. Queen to a1 might have been risky because of queen into e2, but I think he can get away. So I swapped and picked up the d pawn, which was very nice. I've now got an extra pawn. And he played b5. It's probably the best move he's played all game. Just prevents me from moving any of my A or B pawns, A and C, which are paralysed at the moment. So I'm bringing my king into the game now, as he is. And this is where the endgame gets really interesting. Because normally, if bishops are on opposite colour squares, white would probably be a draw list. But because they're not, that makes it all the more interesting. So I played g5. I want to get some pawns off here. I want to get things going. So pawn takes pawn, king takes pawn. Bishop e7 check. King to f5. a4. Bishop back to b6, just to stop that pawn from going on any further. Right, so h3. Now, this is interesting. I'm moving my passed pawn at the board. Now, at this time, he played bishop to b4. Push the pawn on again. And just take a look at this a moment. This is endgame play. If you look on the e file, e2, e3, e4, f4, g4, and even f2 are all moves that the king cannot make. He can't do anything except go back to g2 at the moment. This is what you call covering spaces and causing almost a zugzwang sort of situation. So he has to do something, and he went back to d2 to stop the pawn from moving anymore, which is okay because this is what I want him to do. So I centralised my bishop by going into d4. He's attacked my king, get that pawn off, keep that other pawn well back up the board, which I can easily defend with the bishop should I need to, and start bringing my king across to the king side. King e5. Bishop check. Now this is okay. I knew what I was doing because I knew I was going to be leaving a pawn on for him, but it gives me enough tempo to get across to those pawns over there faster. King e5, bishop takes pawn, king c4. Look where my king is now. I'm really coming around the blind side of white's king to advance his pawn. I can take one of these pawns, probably both of them, but at the moment I don't need to. So he's gone back to bishop to a4. So I can go into a3, b3 with my king and just take that pawn on a4, but then I've got, it's going to be not so easy for me. So I've just offered him a bishop swap and easily won game by advancing the pawn. If he goes bishop takes bishop, king takes, and if he goes king to e3, I can just move the pawn on, and then if he moves the king down to e2, I can just get my king down to c2, and it wins. So he knows this, so he's played bishop back to c7. Now I move my king again, so again I could take that pawn, but that's not the plan. I want his bishop from my pawn, and that gives me a clear win because I'll demonstrate this in a moment. Bishop f4, king into c2. Now this is the crux of the matter. So he's going out. The reason he's going out is because it's pointless going to f2, because after d2, bishop takes bishop, bishop takes bishop, and his king is not going to be able to stop the pawn. So he's thinking he'll go after the f pawn if he can and do something like that. But I've just pushed the pawn down to d2, swapped off for the bishop, and I took the king, and therefore he cannot do anything now. He really can't. If you look at the bar on the right, there is no white showing at all, just a tiny little bit at the very bottom. So it's game over, and he went into f5, but if you have a look, he can't touch that pawn. I'm covering this one square with the bishop that stops him from getting near it. He's never going to get around to it. And I would just sack my bishop for the pawn anyway after I've taken his pawns. So I've got to just make sure I get around to get those pawns. But at this point, Richard resigned anyway. He knew it was a lost cause. So there we go. He can't play a5, so as he can try and get a pawn past. If he did that, I'd just take it, and then I'd march over my king and get the other pawn. And then when he went after my pawn, I'd just cover that black square with my bishop so that I can just take the pawn. So there you go. That's one game. I was very pleased with that end game. I planned it very well, I think, and I hope you appreciate the hard work and thinking that had to go into that. You have to think a lot in end games, a lot more than you do in the rest of the game, because there's so many squares to cover, and you have to be extremely accurate. Otherwise, one wrong move, and you could lose or give away all your advantage. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll look forward to seeing you again later in another game. Thank you very much.